very, very important. Nature is very, very important, and you heard that in the words that he said. It's where the spirit world and the material world intersect from his perspective. So I thought right away, that's not too dissimilar from the 19th century Unitarian Transcendentalists in the United States. They had rejected organized religion and the big, ornate churches in Boston, and went out in the country instead and said, you know what, this is all you need, because the divine, nature, and humans are one, and our goal with religion should be to try to join them all together. So in nature, in this religion, there's a deep connection that goes beyond just what you see, but he talked about it, a bridge into the spirit world. In fact, what Sylvia told me when she first told me about this book was, she said, oh, it's this fascinating people that even before someone is born, when they're still in their mother's womb, they come together, the spiritual people of the community come together and do sort of a divination on determining a name right then and there. And the name is attributed to what they're expected to be, what they think their purpose in life is going to be. So, like I said, the author, Malidoma, means being involved with strangers, and that's very much what he came to be. So that was a big part of it. And then birthplace is important. Even if you move to another village or another part of the world, you need to know what your natural characteristics were of your birthplace, because it's significant to understand someone's spirit. Another belief is that problems and unhealthy atmosphere in one world leads to problems and unhealthy atmosphere in the other. Either way, in the material world, if there's problems, it can cause issues in the spirit world, and vice versa. But where I really found fascinating was the idea of ritual, and ritual versus ceremony. Somebody makes a big discussion on this one. And he says his example was the first time he went to a Western wedding ceremony. He said he expected much more. And what he saw was the bride and groom coming up the aisle in a very organized manner, kind of saying words that looked like they'd been said 1,000 times by 1 million people, and then some vows, and then it's over. And there wasn't a lot of emotion. And in his point of view, even though we would call all of that rituals, it was absent of ritual. He said weddings in his village are all about the two families meditating and holding rituals to understand the spiritual nature of the family that they're about to merge with. And so even though there is a ceremony that's somewhat choreographed, it is open to the unexpected and where the spirit takes them. So he makes this distinction between ritual and ceremony. That is a wedding ceremony, not a ritual. He says ceremonies are very repetitive and controlled. So I've often talked about the rituals in our service, like chalice lighting, singing hymns, sharing joys and concerns. And actually, he would call those ceremonies because they're ritual, they're ritualized, they're the same every week. And we have very clear control over it, norms of behavior. The outcome is very expected with these kinds of things. But yet it does bring community together. That doesn't make it bad. It brings us together. And it probably reminds us of a much more larger, impactful ritual at some point in the distant past. So we use them as remembrances. For example, the second Sunday in June, we're going to have our flower communion service. And many of you that have participated in the past know that that was created by a Unitarian minister in Prague, Czechoslovakia, right before World War II. And it was a very big church. And most of the members had come from Christian faiths before they joined the Unitarian Church. And the minister was very concerned that people were missing the rituals that they had with their Catholic or Lutheran churches from where they came. And so he came up with the idea of flower communion to celebrate spring, to celebrate life, and to celebrate the community. So I'm sure the very first flower communion had a lot more passion and it was a very spontaneous ritual than what we share today, even though I think many of us find it very emotional. Well, in the ritual category, somebody talks about there's radical rituals and maintenance rituals. And so let me talk a little bit about that. Radical rituals is the big deal. It, like the name would imply, it involves major repair of the broken or damaged human psyche or spirit. In fact, in all the rituals, in some way, shape, or form, the physical body is pushed to an extreme to create a situation of tension that then makes it favorable for removing unwanted energy and restoring a more acceptable self. And it's all done in community, so the community is there to support the person to whom this is being done and to lift it up and support them along the way. Whereas a maintenance ritual is done usually by yourself, it's non-stressful, and it's sort of a regular practice of acknowledging that is the existing connection that you've made with the world of the spirit. And it's designed for small kind of regular tune-ups. Like sometimes you might have your whole engine in your car taken out and completely remodeled to put back in because something catastrophic happened. That would be a radical ritual. Just getting your tires changed, your oil changed, or adding fluids would be the regular maintenance or tune-ups that ties back to that original ritual. Anyway, so there's 5 ritual areas, and as you might expect with an indigenous culture, they all tie to nature in some way, shape, or form. And all of them use strong symbolic elements and metaphor. The first one is fire. And unlike in the West, where we think of fire as sort of destructive, forest fires, cities that are bombed and set ablaze and things like that, they look at it as purification, symbolic purification, burning of unwanted elements. So the radical ritual would be a bonfire, something that's very hot and people get close to it until the heat's almost unbearable. In fact, when it's described in the book, it reminded me of stories I've heard about people who visited sweat lodges, where you almost pass out from the heat. But the idea here is that it's a cleansing of the body, but also you bring things to burn in the fire that are symbolic. Maybe there's something about your life that you want to be able to walk away from, and you have a symbol that you're ready to burn and throw into the fire. The maintenance version of this ritual is done obviously at home, maybe with a fireplace, a candle, and something simpler like burning paper with symbolic words or images on it to remind you of what you experienced in the radical ritual. Water, in this religion, water unites things that must be united, or reconciliation. It's really focused on togetherness in the interest of the community. So the radical ritual would be like a full immersion in cold water. Think of the polar plunge in Lake Michigan every New Year's Day. It's aimed at producing this massive cathartic result because your body is sort of shocked into awareness and all this adrenaline rushes in. But when you get out and get a warm blanket around you, it's just this calming effect. The maintenance version, he said, is like a libation of water poured out to encourage peace and togetherness with the people that you're trying to reunite. It immediately made me think of our ceremony, mingling of the waters, where we all come from wherever we were over the summer with a source of water from your back hose or from the Grand Canyon, it doesn't matter. And we mingle it together and share our experiences as we've been away. But that's more of a ceremony than a radical ritual. Earth is the next one, and earth is all about mutual protection. He says, we protect the earth, and then she in turn provides for us. Now, rituals of this sort emphasize this sense of belonging, of self-worth, of relationships and community. Think of it this way, the earth is our womb, our place of origin. And the radical and maintenance rituals, again, are just different degrees of involvement in usually tangible earth. So the big one is touching the earth. In the radical way, it's probably entering a small cave, so you almost have to lay down in it. Or maybe you create a shrine of earth, almost like symbolically being buried and meditating very close and surrounded by the earth. Whereas the maintenance version might be that you just lay on freshly tilled soil or hold the soil and the earth to come back to that original ritual. Mineral is the next one, and this one's about restoring lost memories. And in this sense, by lost memories, they mean coming back to your life's purpose. They believe that there's a life purpose linked to every human being. And as I said before, it comes from the spirit world. Some's name, Malidoma, means be friends with stranger. They believe that everyone is gifted. Everyone has something to give in their own way. So in the radical ritual, the community will publicly call out the person's gifts and then present stones or minerals as gifts that go along with the long storytelling that goes with it. The maintenance version of this ritual is a home altar where you have these stones. And you can hold them and meditate and remember the stories and remember why they said you had self-worth. The last is more general, it's nature. Nature, and all of these are elements of nature, but this is specifically more plants. And the quote was that humans need plants to survive, but plants don't necessarily need humans to survive. The radical idea here was this intense focus on a single item in nature. Somebody opens the book with a story of the green lady of the tree. He went away to parochial school from the time he was in first grade all the way through high school. And when he was 18, he came back to his tribe. He was in a French Catholic boarding school. And he couldn't adjust to tribal life again. He had grown up in a completely different culture. And so they did an initiation rite with him that they normally would do with probably a 12 or 13-year-old boy. And he had to stare at a tree and meditate on a tree for over 30 hours. And eventually he tells the story that he had a hallucination, a vision, that the tree turned into a green lady that embraced him and essentially welcomed him back to his village and the spirit world. And frankly, it isn't too dissimilar from the coming of age experiences I had as a mentor with the Fox Valley Fellowship, where we went out all day. It wasn't quite so grueling. It wasn't 30 hours. It was more like 4 or 5, but really found a spot in nature and stayed there all day meditating. And most of us stared at one thing and journaled about it. So the maintenance of this would be anything that gets you back in touch with nature. A walk outside, looking out your window at nature. In their culture, it's often making offerings of food to the spirit world. And so you'll find plates of food next to a tree or a stream. So that's a summary of the rituals as Somé points them out. So why am I spending time on this today? Well, first of all, it was a great book and Sylvia asked me to read it and tell you about it, but I think we can go further forward with this. In the last couple of sermons in the last couple of months, I've talked about spiritual development, spiritual journeys, religious exploration. And I would like to propose this as an exploration opportunity. I would like to propose it to incorporate this into the spiritual development opportunities of each of our fellowships. I mean, I'm just thinking of ideas. I don't want to do this myself. I want fellow sojourners, but the concept might be, he's talked about 5 different parts of nature. We could do it 5 times a year, outdoors, and doing some sort of our version of a radical ritual. So I'm looking for interested and passionate seekers to join me on this journey so that we can together discover how the healing wisdom of Africa can be meaningful and healing to Unitarian Universalists in Northeast Wisconsin. So to get you thinking, I'm actually going to share the discussion questions now, a little bit earlier in the service than normal, and help you along with this. So here they are. So I make the statement that Somé makes a distinction between repetitive and controlled ceremony and unique spontaneous ritual. So I want to get your head wrapped around that distinction and what that means to you. So I'd like you to share, what do you think of the distinction in the first place? Is it clear? Is it murky? But can you give personal examples of each, like he did the wedding ceremony, so that you get a sense in the discussion of what we're talking about? Ceremonies are what we do on Sunday morning, and then spontaneous ritual, it would be maybe what we do 5 times a year in a kind of an all-day thing, a Saturday perhaps. So then the second question is, should our fellowship, each fellowship, provide more opportunities for nature-focused ritual outside of Sunday mornings? And I've asked the breakout session facilitators to summarize and give me back what people think. I'm serious about trying to look at this as an opportunity, and I really, really would like your feedback today. So while you're pondering those questions, I'm going to close with the words back from Some again. What would it be like if that intensity of human connection could be found here, in addition to all of the material wealth that is available? If the human wealth could match the material wealth, what would happen? Heaven could be created right here. Ashe, and may it be so.